Mark Jacobson is a former advisor to Defense Secretary Ash Carter. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. with more on this. He knows the general as well. Mark, was this resignation inevitable?
I'm not sure it was inevitable. Well, let me put it this way. I'm not sure it was inevitable from the beginning, but given that we discovered that that National Security Advisor Flynn had misinformed, in his own words, the vice president, from that point is where I think it's inevitable. I mean, this is not about the conversations he had with the Russian ambassador or other Russian diplomats. This was about the way he characterized it to the vice president, plain and simple. And for that reason.
But how can it not be about both? It could be about how he characterized the conversations based on his claims of how he characterized it. And how is the content of those conversations not as relevant?
It's relevant in context. I guess the point I'd make is this. There have been questions as to whether or not Mike Flynn violated the Logan Act, which prohibits his interference on a personal level with U.S. foreign relations. That law is charges have never been brought up against anyone based on the Logan Act. I'm less concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the fact that he may have lied to the vice president. I mean, that's what gets you, as your correspondent was talking about. It's really the cover-up that gets you here. And there's been a lack of transparency. There's been a looseness with the truth from this White House, at best an utter dysfunction, that I think is creating these situations where we are not quite sure what to believe.
Okay.
In fact, if I could make one other point.
Sure.
We heard that Flynn had tendered his resignation this evening. Earlier in the day, Kellyanne Conway stated that, well, the president has full trust and confidence in Mike Flynn. And now we're hearing that this resignation has been in the works for 3 days. So it's what to believe. I'm not quite sure at this late hour here in the U.S. what to believe as well.
And when you say that, what to believe, yes, there still are many questions remaining. There are investigations that are happening. What do you think are the most pressing questions that still need to be answered? And does this resignation necessarily put a lid on any of that?
And in fact, I think you're going to hear from the White House tomorrow. Look, this should put an end to all the speculation about Russia investigations. Absolutely not. In fact, what we've seen here, in my mind, increases the need for a full-fledged independent investigation into what ties the Russians had with the Trump campaign, what impacts the Russian involvement may have had with the election. This definitely doesn't put a lid on that. There are some indications that the Department of Justice had warned the Trump administration several weeks ago that Mike Flynn's relationship with the Russians may have been a potential source for blackmail. And of course, that should be very concerning. Now, we've already heard stories about compromising material the Russians keep on everyone who gets in their way. And frankly, despite some harsh anti-NATO and pro-Russia rhetoric from the White House, Flynn was not necessarily there. And that's what the irony is here. Those who hoped for a harder line on Russia might be quite surprised, depending who comes in as the next national security advisor.
Mark, General Flynn was a bit of a controversial choice, to say the least. And obviously, this position did not need confirmation. President Trump was able to do whatever he wanted. Tell us about the Mike Flynn you know.
Sure. I mean, the Mike Flynn that I served with in Afghanistan twice was absolutely brilliant as an intelligence operator. This is a man who helped the United States in Iraq come up with a system to systematically and rapidly evaluate data that then would allow the operators to go out and hunt down high-value targets, to go out and get terrorists. He helped Stan McChrystal and Dave Petraeus in Iraq and Afghanistan make significant progress against the insurgencies in both places. But it's Mike Flynn, the politician, that became problematic. I've never been thrilled with the idea of him becoming a partisan political figure. I've always been a bit concerned about it. And I think when people watched that Mike Flynn this past summer, they were understandably concerned. The rhetoric on violent extremist jihadism, the rhetoric on Islam, frankly, the rhetoric, the leading of the, quote, lock her up chants against Hillary Clinton, that was very disconcerting to many of us. I miss Mike Flynn, the intelligence operator. I miss the Mike Flynn who thinks objectively and clearly about national security issues.
Okay. Mark, really good to have your insight. We appreciate it. And we're going to have to see what comes out of the White House tomorrow. Thank you, Mark.
My pleasure.